Eric Lagerstrom at long last. Welcome to the Free Trail Podcast, buddy. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you too, man. It feels like we've been trying to line this up for over a year.
Seriously, we should publish the text chain of like, hey, pod next week. And then 3-4 weeks pass and nothing happens.
Seriously. I feel like it goes back so much longer than that, though. I can still remember running with you and Aaron Lutz on, I guess we were running on Germantown at that point and discussing like your potential foray into podcasting back in Portland days. So.
Here we are, almost 6 years deep for my pod. And we were just chatting about your pod, which I'll make sure to link to in the show notes here, which is increasingly talking about trail running, which we certainly appreciate and our audience appreciates. So another hot podcast.
Yeah. As I'm starting to do trail running, we chat about it. And like, I keep catching Paula listening to your podcast and the Single Track podcast. Like the stuff that we're listening to is slowly changing as well. It's a really cool space.
The Venn diagram is slowly
it's closing.
It's closing.
Or overlapping, whatever.
Well, you and I have known each other for a long time, but I ask everybody here on the podcast the traditional same opening question, which is what makes you you? It's a good way to get introspective to kick things off. So introduce us to Eric Lagerstrom. What are your unique strengths and weaknesses? How do they show up in your life?
I feel like what I bring to the world is the ability I get excited easily, and I feel like I can help other people get excited pretty well. The biggest way that manifests is like I see something beautiful, or as I'm riding my bike or running, like I feel an emotional, like just intense reaction to something that I see, or a way that I imagine someone running through the woods, and I want to share that and see if I can. Like the ultimate drug for me is when I create a video or take a photo and somebody tells me that they ultimately ended up feeling the same way that I felt in that moment. So like that transmission of energy and excitement is what it's all about for me.
It's so perfect. So I'm sure the reason I like asking that at the beginning is because we always find ways to weave it into the conversation later on, but I feel like maybe we should just go straight into it now. You know, one of the things you and I have in common is our shared love of media, especially sports media. That Triathlon Life is your company and a place where you've shared excitement with, probably millions of viewers across the world at this point. But I noticed that recently you rebranded it from That Triathlon Life to TTL Multisport, sort of at the same time you started experimenting with trail running. So tell me about that very slight rebrand, and if I'm touching on something there.
Yeah, it was. I would call it like a soft rebrand. Like I just kind of started throwing it out there and saying it on the podcast occasionally, and I changed the title of the YouTube channel. But like the people who have been with us since the beginning, they know what TTL is and what it stands for. But increasingly, I feel like like so many triathletes, they just like do a Kona or they do an Ironman, and then they're just kind of like, oh, now what? But there's like so much, I think, to offer as an athlete that can swim, that can bike, and that can run, and so many different cool things that you can do. And I was like, it's not a matter of like not wanting to turn people off, but just encouraging and be like, hey, if you want to take next year and just trail run or just gravel ride or whatever it is, like you don't have to feel like you gave up on being a serious triathlete. Like just enjoy life.
Yeah. So speaking of the Venn diagrams starting to overlap a little bit more, how's the community responded? I mean, as the channel has become, it still has a lot of triathlon specific material, but it is becoming a little bit more exploratory. Has the audience and the community responded in kind?
Yeah, for the most part, like YouTube and social media and algorithms and everything are interesting spaces of, there's like the audience, but then there's this medium that's between you and the audience. And that sometimes it feels like you have to satisfy the medium to get to the audience. Okay. So there's like, that's a little bit interesting as you pivot from like doing specifically triathlon stuff to doing like, oh, I did a duathlon that was up a mountain, and I did a swim run event that's swimming and running over and over, back and forth through nature. Like, as long as it's a thing that I think people can kind of imagine themselves doing, it seems to work pretty well. But yeah, it's been a little bit of a process. And like my wife, Paula, is still very much in the specific triathlon space. So we still continue to put out content around that. And I still love it. It's, just like at this point in life, I want to experiment with some other things and see what I can do before like knees completely give out and
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah, well, it's great. And again, I'll provide links in the show notes for those who are unfamiliar with the channel. It's definitely been ahead of its time and very important in your community. And we'll come back and talk about it some more in a bit. But I wanted to ask you about Heather specifically, Heather Jackson. I know you're personal friends with HJ. How has the triathlon community, especially like your peers at the pro ranks, how have they interpreted her second life as an athlete, and maybe how have you personally felt about it? Because I think it's been inspiring to a lot of people.
Yeah. I haven't talked to too many like pro athletes about it, but certainly the people that I have talked to, and my personal thing is like, anytime that you can tell that someone's doing something that they love or on a mission to like for self-fulfillment, or, like you can sense the excitement that she has for it and the feeling of like, this is what I was meant to do, at least at this point in my life. And you can't help but get excited about someone for that, about get excited for someone in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to your original answer here. Heather Jackson, also somebody who shares excitement. Well, yeah, we've been just making the constant comment that, we can just tell how much fun Heather is having here in V2 of her athletic career. And I can't help but think that there's a lot of people sort of in your similar situation who may be looking at Heather as a blueprint that they might be able to follow with their own athletic career. So
yeah. I don't know if you watched the film that I put out earlier in spring. It's called Look for Things Where You Can Find Them.
Yes.
And the opening scene in that, pretty close to the opening scene, is with Heather. And like kind of spiritually, for me, she definitely served as like an example of someone who just like fully quote, cut the cord in her existing career and jumped into a tangential one or whatever, and is making, her other sponsors stayed on board and we're excited about it. And has, I don't even think it necessarily has that much to do with how well she's performing, but just like you said, the excitement and the energy that you feel. And I think that's just like a powerful story. And for anybody, to see is this person's doing what they want to do, even though it's a little bit unconventional and it's working out, or at least they're, like psyched on it.
Yeah. So now let's talk about how this applies to your personal career and your personal life. We don't need to do like too much background and context setting here, but maybe you could just give us like the condensed version of like where you've been in your professional athletic life and what the circumstances were that conspired to help you move towards trail running at the time that you did. So just give us the condensed version of your competitive career and why you became interested in trail running.
It's occurred to me in the last couple of years as I've been more introspective that I think I was initially motivated by not having a job, like not having a real job. I was like 2/3 of the way through a college degree in exercise physiology. I was getting straight A's and I did a great job in school. I was just good at it, but I couldn't envision myself using that. And when I talked to a physical therapist about charting, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so much office time. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to handle this. And I was like wildly mediocre at sports. Like I didn't qualify for nationals as a swimmer, even though that's what I did my whole life. I was like pretty good at the state level and the regional level. And then I started running cross country in high school to get better at running for triathlon. And then I think I like during college really saw the opportunity of like, I'm trending in a way that I could actually be a professional at this sport, and a door open to a potential career that did not involve the man or being in a cubicle, or these things that I just dreaded with all of my soul. So I went down that pathway. I got a job at a bike shop. I worked for 3 years to save up 10 grand. That was like my startup money to be a pro triathlete. And I moved to San Diego to a full-time training group that was full of pros trying to make it to the Olympics. And I mean, long story short, I ultimately started making money as a triathlete before that $10,000 ran out.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. Mission accomplished. So move on from there and just like have to do that thing that you do where you got to like set new goals. Like, okay, first goal was to make the living at this, prove my parents and everybody else wrong that this could be a real job. And now where can I take it? So I was first alternate for the Rio Olympics, missed out on by the final race by like 14 seconds. And then was confronted with this, what do I do now? Go back for another Olympic quad or try something different. something different at the time was 70.3 half Ironman racing, which really represented like this entrepreneurial thing where no longer are you burdened by what USA Triathlon, what races they say you should go do, or, funding criteria and stuff. It's just, you call sponsors, try to get sponsorship money, go try to win races and like run a little mini team of one. And I think that's like where I really started to, I don't know, that gave me like a whole new life in the sport, because like that's how my brain works. I was very excited about it. I had to build a brand around myself and be somebody.
Yeah.
And like, no one's going to take care of you. You have to do it yourself. So fast forward along, made a pretty good career at that. It was 6th in the world at 70.3 world championships in St. George, Utah. And then kind of in the last couple of years, I started feeling like the need to do something different again. So I started doing some Xterra racing, which is triathlon that's off-road, mountain biking and trail running. And my sister, Elise, got very into trail running. And I think her influence really started to push me in this direction of like, okay, like if she can do it, like I think I could get through one and I should go give that a shot. And I would almost say, now that I have finally made that ultimate transition into like just doing 50Ks, I mean, just doing a running event that doesn't have anything else involved. And if I look back on my career, it's like, I kind of just wish I'd taken all these steps a little sooner. Like I wish that I had switched to 70.3 a couple years earlier. And I wish I had switched to doing some trail stuff a couple years earlier. And I wish I'd put out this film that I finally put out a couple years earlier, because all of these ideas were there and it felt right. It took me a long time to finally get over that hump of action to like cast off and try something new.
All right. So 100 milers in 2026. That's the lesson.
Yeah. Just going to like not make that mistake again. Not going to regret being slow to change straight to I'm just going to go to Cocodona, I think.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Perfect. Yeah. Shout out Elise. Yeah. She's a fallen trail athlete herself. The family has great athletic genetics, but all right. So most of the audience, I would guess, is familiar with TTL, That Triathlon Life, but I'd love to spend a few minutes just talking about it, because to me, it feels like you were one of the original athlete creators. And, I'm sure you've felt this, but to me, as I observe people, especially in the triathlon space, it feels like you and Paula were trendsetters in a lot of ways, like kind of, in my mind, the first channel that was led by pro triathletes, and now they're a dime a dozen. You would know more about this than me, but I don't know. I guess just building on what you said of like the goal just being able to create a living where you're not reporting to somebody else, where you're kind of in charge of your own schedule. At what point did you realize that you were onto something with TTL? Was it really early? Like, did you have a sense early on that there was an audience for what you were putting out in the world?
Yeah. It was an interesting progression because prior to TTL, I started a thing called Transition 4. And prior to that, I had a YouTube channel or existence called Viking Life, which was a title that was bestowed upon me by my former manager. And this was at the time that I was sponsored by Red Bull. And like I think I met you right around that same time. But this was very much like me traveling around the world doing it. And I was putting out YouTube videos in like 2014. On bike race recap stuff, like where I would narrate what was going on inside of the race for people who didn't understand like strategy and stuff. And then I switched into vlog style content. I was super inspired by Brandon Semenuk's Life Behind Bars series. And when I first started making YouTube videos, I was kind of tailoring it off of that. Like I'd write down, there's like, there was a minute of intro and then he'd talk for 15 seconds and then they'd show B-roll hype stuff for like 45 seconds. And so I was kind of like using that as a blueprint because I liked the way it flowed so much. I liked his style. And I just my literal thought was, if I can sort of get the ball rolling on some triathlon content, because there was none at the time, then maybe Red Bull or other like brands or companies will see that triathlon could actually be cool and start to make some stuff that I can ultimately watch. Because like I would just, and I still do, but at the time, all there was to do was like, I'd go watch snowboard or mountain bike videos to get hyped before going out and doing my triathlon workout.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like I saw like a need in the space for it. And I was like, I'm just going to plug this hole for the meantime until, someone can come along and do it right. And it wasn't really until like end of 2019 when Paula and I had been dating for a couple years that her contribution to like me just being this bachelor dude going around and not that entertaining like her being involved in the show, for lack of a better word, was like kind of the spark, or, you know, like the kindling that the whole thing needed, the extra dimension for it to be watchable for, you know, a wider audience.
Yeah, fantastic. So it brings up something that I think might be interesting too, and that really what you're saying is that you started making the content that you wanted to see in the sport that you loved. And I think we had a similar motivation at Free Trail. And I've talked to Payson McKelvin about this too, who has a popular podcast in mountain bike and gravel. And the way we've set up our operation is like Free Trail more or less covers the sport, where you're doing more like artistic filmmaking. And it's more a story about you and Paula and your experience in the sport than about the sport itself. Have you guys ever thought about that? Like, because to me, it feels like it'd be very easy for you and Paula to have like a show and a YouTube channel that just talks about the news in triathlon. And it feels like you've intentionally not gone that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is exactly correct, and it's like what fires you up. And I think, like I'll just speak for myself. I don't know if I can speak for you, but there's not enough money to be made into this to be like spending as much time as we do on something that we're not excited to talk about or share. So like for me, that has not been diving into the statistics of the races from the week and who's so-and-so, what did they post on Strava and how does that impact their future, you know, world championship thing. Like I enjoy listening to some of that stuff, but I much more enjoy consuming and creating things that are like strike this deep emotional chord with somebody, or can take their day and turn it from a negative day into a positive day. So yes, we could very easily report on the sport, but we do a little bit of that in our podcast intro each week. But like what I'm passionate about is getting that direct message, or just meeting somebody who says, oh my gosh, I've watched that 10 times. And every time it's just like, I was having a bad day and I'm having a good day. So, you know, like, do what you want to do and then like figure out how to, hopefully it pays the bills. You figure that out later.
So then coming back to this kind of trend that you guys started, like just off the top of my head, right? Like Lionel Sanders, Sam Long, Lucy Charles, Joe Skipper, like they've all got YouTube channels now. Maybe it'd be interesting to talk about, and the same thing is happening in trail running, though it feels like we're a few years behind. Also, where now a lot of the top pros are telling their own stories through their own platforms. But I think it might be interesting to just riff together a little bit on like what it takes to be a pro athlete now, because you and Paul have been doing this for a long time, and you were both on the competitive side and on now the storytelling side too. And it seems that the landscape has changed in such a way to where gone are the days that being a good athlete is enough, and that really you almost have to be telling your story in this more high production way. Do you and Paula talk about that? About like kind of piecing together a career that is truly professional and like what that means and the demands that it has on your time?
Yeah, for sure. And it feels like it's something that's constantly in flux too. I think more and more, just as it becomes, it's challenging to do. And YouTube, that also gone are the days of YouTube just like being so wide open and having no competition, and shorts are involved now. So like there's also this shift of, you know, time that you put in doesn't necessarily equal, you know, like this linear curve of reward. And that's a factor, but I think it is possible, first thing, to like be an athlete and not have this, you know, personal storytelling thing. I think if you're transcendent and you're fast or good enough or whatever, like you pretty quickly get to the point of where you can just pay somebody else to do that for you and have it limp along just enough that I think your in-race performances are good enough. But this is like a generational type of person. Like for the most part, and if they were telling their story, I think they would make even more money and have even more staying power in the sport. So we talk about it a little bit, but I actually talk about it with Lucy more, but significantly more, of if like TTL is here and I almost put it, you know, created it to have like a runway for post racing life. And it, as I've observed with you and Free Trail, it almost like the runway took over. And now you're just
100%. It ruined my athletic career.
Exactly. So like I'm in in a similar like give and take, pull right now of like, I could put a ton more time into it, but also I love racing and I love, getting the most out of myself every day physically. So that you know where I'm going with that. It's just, it's interesting because like everybody has to tell their story, but also like it does take away from you being a hermit.
Right. Yeah. Well, you guys do such a good job of it. And clearly both you and Paula are competing at such a high level. And now, you experimenting with other sport, I think it's a good time to just kind of focus on that for the rest of the conversation. But maybe before we do, I think as an elegant transition, we could just talk about kind of the state of triathlon right now and whether or not you're still feeling that the sport is retaining its momentum and growth from, when you were first getting into it. Like, is there a reason why it felt like the right time to come into trail running, something that was more appealing about our culture, our sport, or just a period of your life that made it the right time to make this move?
Yeah, I think there were a few factors. I've been dealing, I don't want to get too into it, but like I've been dealing with a hip injury. I have a torn labrum that went south on me before the 2016 qualification race for the Olympics, and a big part of why I didn't ultimately qualify. And I've been dealing with that ever since. And it's just kind of steadily deteriorating. And it felt like it impacts the bike more than the run. And so I initially started doing Xterra with the idea of more upright bike position than a time trial position, see if that helps. So that's one thing, is the run. It seems to be less impactful to the run. Then like Paula's career really, really going well, feeling like if I back off a little bit and like can support her in any way and focus on my racing a little bit less, that's productive. And then also coming to a point in my career with my sponsors where I can talk to Wahoo and I can talk to Specialized and Castelli and say like, hey, I want to not race as much and do this project over here. Are you on board with that? And they're like, heck yeah. It didn't, at one point in time, it felt like, oh man, if I take the foot off the gas of the athletic pursuit of winning, even for 1 second, like I'm not gonna be valuable to sponsors anymore.
Yeah. So it's both practical and in line with what you're actually interested in doing.
Yeah. I've been tempted to do, alternative stuff for a very long time. It felt like too risky.
Is there anything that was hard to let go from like kind of the pro tri life? Or is there anything that maybe pro trail can learn from a slightly more mature sport, that being pro triathlon?
Probably the hardest thing for me to, let go of is just you train less. Like even if you're running like 150 miles a week, the amount of time that you're spending doing that relative to like having to swim and bike and run and have 2 hard workouts in each sport each week, it feels like I'm not doing that much.
It's crazy.
And being okay with that.
Overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's interesting to watch as trail running transitions, like, or professionalizes, to use like words that I've heard on podcasts. And people are like interested in having a YouTube channel, and more people are doing altitude, and people are discovering high carb and all this stuff of like, and I've had like some longer conversations with Ian Boswell about this as it relates to gravel, of like, now it's an interesting time right now for people to like set a precedent of what it means to be a professional athlete. And like the power can be in the athlete's hands of, the expectation is that you race a 50K and 100-mile each year and you're valuable, versus like, oh, you got to race 12 50Ks. Otherwise everyone's going to wonder why you took the year off.
Yeah.
And you have to X, Y, and Z for sponsors is the expectation and whatever. So like you have a little bit of an opportunity to set a precedent, and like maybe trail running is in a cool space where it can do what I was hoping triathlon would be able to do, of like, you can have project-based athletes. Mm-hmm. Like I just do FKTs, or I just make up the craziest running video in Iceland and Sri Lanka and et cetera. And that can be me, like snowboarding and mountain biking.
Totally. Project-based athletes. That's straight from the Aaron Lutzy vernacular. And you and Payson McKelvin, who I mentioned earlier, all come from the Lutzy coaching tree. So shout out Aaron.
Yeah.
All right. So again, you sort of put one foot in the trail running water with Xterra, but it seems like you very intentionally made your quote unquote 50K debut at Behind the Rocks, or what was it? The Run the Rock 50K outside of Bend, Smith Rock, sort of
Smith
a
Rock.
local 50K around where you live.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that and about like to what extent it influenced what I'm interpreting as a deeper dive into the trail world here in 2025. It feels like after that big breakthrough debut victory, you're like, you know what? I think I want to do more of this.
Yeah, that was just me. That was fully the experiment of like, I think I'm going to like this, but I'm not going to fly around the world to find out. So we've got a really good trail running scene here in Bend, like Max King and Mario Mendoza and Chris Jones and like Matt Palila and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I think Zach Miller spends part of the year there too.
Yep. Zach Miller's here a fair bit. So like I looked at the course record and stuff for the Smith Rock and Mario had it. And I'd seen like on Strava, like all these guys had like made cracks at it over the last few years. And that kind of just like fired me up and gave me a storyline that I thought was interesting. Like if I can go to this local race and get the course record, you know, amongst guys who are proven on the world stage, then that would give me the confidence to like spend the winter training to do Black Canyon versus just like go back to the triathlon grind and stay the course. So full experiment,
but you won. Remind me though, in triathlon, I think I've heard you say before that running was kind of your weakest discipline. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
I would say so. Like relative to at the time, relative to what it took to like win a gold medal, that was the thing that I felt like I needed to work the most on. And like kind of almost specifically at that 10K pace. Like if you want to win a gold medal and, you know, running off the bike 10K in a triathlon, like you gotta be around 29 flat, 29, 30. Yeah. And I was like, the best I'd ever run was like 30, 50. So had a bit of a ways to go there, but like, I've always been excited about like challenges like that, you know, like nobody thinks I can run. I grew up a swimmer. I'm going to prove people wrong, or I'm going to do this thing that is considered to be the biggest long shot.
Yeah. Okay. So then coming to Black Canyon, honestly, a freaking baller result. You finished second place behind Jeshurun Small. You're just a few minutes back of him and a few minutes ahead of Chris Myers, who then a few months later ran the third fastest time in Western States history.
I was so psyched when he did that.
Yeah. Anyway, and you said in the sort of recap video from Black Canyon, which I rewatched again today, that you didn't really know how to set goals for Black Canyon, but that you know how to go hard for 4 hours. So tell us about Black Canyon, like the goals that you had going in or the lack thereof, and the extent to which you surprised yourself there.
You know, I felt like my result at Smith Rock was good, or the time that I ran, got the course record and won. And, but it was like a very different course and like no one else was there. And, you know, I tried to pretty much ignore the start list heading into Black Canyon because like people kept texting me, oh man, so-and-so, and they've got a 2:15 marathon and blah, blah, like way faster than I've ever run. And it just sounded like there was going to be this crazy mashup of like proven athletes and guys fresh off of road marathons, just nuking it at the beginning and like so hard to draw any conclusion from that. I was like, I want to go and be in it and race with somebody and feel like I'm in it. Like usually that's how I approach a race. And like that, I just had no idea what to expect. I was like, I'm probably going to get dropped in the first 5K is what I was assuming was going to happen. And then maybe I would catch up later on, because it's just like, I don't know anybody on the start list. I just know that everybody's telling me this is going to be the most insanely fast race of the year.
Yeah. So maybe then coming back to your experience as an athlete, I mean, 70.3 was more or less your bread and butter through the, middle through late stages of your, really focused triathlon career. To what extent does a 50K map to a 70.3, or I guess vice versa? To what extent did your experience as a 70.3 quote unquote specialist create the engine that was also applicable towards a 50K?
I feel like it's a kind of a similar effort. You know, it takes like 3 hours and 45 minutes or something to do a fast 70.3. It's pretty punchy. You have to start the swim very fast. You have to start the bike very hard. You have to cover moves on the bike. And then the run is ultimately, it's like the last hour and a half, hour and 10 minutes of a 3.5 hour effort. So you're running tired and just having to like push through that. So to me, that seems like, oh, this makes perfect sense. Like trail running should be like pretty, I mean, analogous or whatever, pretty similar. The thing that's just the big obvious difference is elevation, like running up and down. And no matter what, even though I consider myself to be like a technically pretty good trail runner, there was no need to do an hour of running at 8% or 12% or power hiking to train for triathlon. That would literally be detrimental. So that's the thing that I think is the biggest difference, is like up and down steep running.
Yeah. In the video, it's clear that you made up the most amount of time where you put yourself in position to potentially win the race on the climb out of Bumblebee up towards Gloriana Mine. Yeah. And to me, I was like, that actually probably portends quite a high ceiling in terms of Lagerstrom's potential as a trail runner. If he's like, putting time into guys like Chris Myers and Jeshrin Small on a climb. Have you intentionally done specific things to prepare for those specific demands of trail races, or to improve at the technical aspects of climbing and descending?
For sure. And I almost like the climb out of Bumblebee. I think it's like, what is it? It takes like 5 minutes. It's
it's pretty quick, but you're sort of in a consistent, it's not a steep climb, but you're sort of consistently going uphill there for
it is going uphill, and it's like a little bit chunky. It was like the most technical footing part of the 50K there. Like it seemed like, so there's something there, but I would say that's probably my sweet spot, is like a 4% grade. I'm like pretty good at running up a 4% grade, but beyond that is just not something that I've had to work on for triathlon. But now I have. After that, I felt like, man, I was on track to catch Jeshurun, like based on that Bumblebee to Gloriana Mines section. And then the quads just like completely gave out, to the point of just like, I was screaming in agony as I was running down the final hill to get to the finish line. And I felt like, man, I feel like I could have caught up to him and then had a battle and seen what had happened, but I won't know until I, toughen up these like little triathlon road runner legs. So been working pretty hard on that.
Well, dude, I mean, again, baller result. Does it give you some motivation maybe coming out of Black Canyon to think like, I mean, you probably weren't as familiar with who Jeshrin and Chris Myers were at that point.
I knew who Chris was just because I'd seen him running like a reel from him running Gorge, and then done a little bit of a like figure out who he is.
That's right. I filmed that reel.
Yeah.
That was VO2 Max. But really, they're two of like the most promising young athletes in the US right now. And you were right in between them. I mean, we could have run it, or you could have won that race on a different day. I mean, that probably gives you a signal that you're onto something, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm, and the rest of the year, I unfortunately like had a quote crash while trail running outside of St. George on some rocks and stuff. And I was going to do canyons and see how that went.
That's right. That was one of those moments where I texted you, said, all right, let's do this pod finally. And you're like, oh, I'm not coming.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to do pre-canyons. So like it's a little bit TBD, and it's been interesting to watch like the OCC and watch how 50Ks I feel like are even progressing just like from last year to this year with the level of athlete that's coming in. Like the guy who won Kodiak has like a 2:09 marathon PR and like a 62 minute half marathon PR.
Andrea Blanes, the Spanish guy.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's really interesting for me to watch that, and like, do I already need to go up and do 100Ks because I'm like getting too old and slow for 50Ks at the rate it's going?
It brings up something that I thought would be fun to riff on, which is just, again, like kind of coming back to the overlap of the Venn diagram here, like race tactics and especially like aid station transitions in trail now. It's kind of similar to triathlon in that it's like these critical moments where you have to be incredibly dialed, and where even some of the top pro athletes are simulating their aid station transitions and training to make sure they're dialed during the race. In other words, quote unquote, the sport is professionalizing, to use a word that you used earlier. But do you view, I don't know, like as you've come into trail, has there been things like that where it surprised you how like similar it is, of just like gaming things out in the way that you were in triathlon now in a different sport?
I think the things that are interesting or that are similar is just seeing the nutrition become everybody having their nutrition aha moments and just like pacing and, yeah, like I think it's hilarious you guys call it transitions, because are you really transitioning?
Well, yeah, I mean,
I feel like it should be called like a pit stop.
Yeah, when there's crew involved, yeah, transition becomes a word that's probably more appropriate. When you're just like filling up a water bottle at an aid station, maybe it's
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, triathletes are like extremely, like we practice our transitions, jumping on and off the bike, and you practice taking your wetsuit off as fast as you can, and like yes, every single little second matters, especially in a race where drafting on the bike is a factor, which is pretty much every triathlon for the most part. And if not like drafting, then just the psychological advantage of being in the main group. Yep. And that's, I mean, what I'm observing or seeing in trail running now is it feels like everybody's doing a pretty similar thing to what people, especially men, do in professional triathlon, where it's like, okay, we all know that you have no chance of being within 10 minutes of the top 5 guys at this race, but you're going to go out with them for the first 3/4 or first half of the race until you explode massively and can barely make it back. But that's just what you feel like everybody feels like they should be doing. It's like, I gotta be in it.
It is interesting. And the whole phenomenon of needing to maintain contact is definitely becoming a reality in trail running too. Whereas, in the past, it was more realistic to come from behind to win or to get dropped by a group and then bridge back up and re-engage and still be in the mix. Now, I mean, Chris Myers and Caleb Olson was the perfect representation of this at Western States this year. Like the two of them got away. They worked together for just long enough. Chris stopped to pee. Then Caleb was on his own to the end. Like a lot of that pack dynamic is now bleeding into the sport too.
I'm so curious. I want to see somebody challenge it. Like, if those guys knew that they were that fit, could they have built out a pacing strategy and like put the blinders on and forgot about everybody else and run 3 minutes faster by running a perfectly executed pace? Or were they going to win no matter what because they were just the best person? And it just so happens that like people fell off of their pace versus like a big decisive move being made. So it'd be cool. Like if Poopy came and did, like Western States next year and is like, looks like he's going to be the favorite. Like, what if he just like let the lead group go and get 20 minutes on him, but then just like literally sprinted by people in the last 10K? I don't know.
It's really interesting. It actually, I wonder if this would be fun to talk about too, because now people are getting really analytical about their pacing in a way that I feel like they have been in cycling and triathlon for a long time. Ruth Croft is the perfect example of this last year at UTMB, where she was like awkwardly far back of the lead early and then ran her way through to a really strong second, but she was maybe a little bit too conservative, adjusted for that in a real algorithm, had a data scientist like provide that pacing strategy for her, and then she wins the race. Do you guys do stuff like that in triathlon? Like, is that something that you would envision as if you were, again, you're coming from a sport that's slightly more mature. Do you envision things like that becoming more and more commonplace in trail?
I can't imagine that they wouldn't be. It's just like gravel cycling. Like as soon as there started to be a little bit of financial incentive in it, all of a sudden you have all of the tactics that have been used in road cycling for the last 15 years coming in with guys living in altitude tents and team strategy and the whole deal. So like in triathlon, like most famous are the Norwegians for using science and data. And, I think some of it's a little bit sensationalized because it's good content, but they pretty famously 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago? Yeah. When Christian and Gustav had their best Konas, were like wearing but they had inserted inside of themselves a temperature, measurement, real-time temperature measurement device. And we're using that to dictate speed on the run.
It's madness. So, one of the top 3 men this year at the World Championship, all Norwegians.
Yeah. And if you look at it, the guy who won, like everybody else was kind of, Kasper Stornes who won. The other 2 Norwegians had kind of marked each other, and there was other people involved. But like every 30 seconds, that guy was looking at his watch, and I guarantee he's looking at his heart rate, and it just knows 162. Like if I go 163, it's a matter of time until it's over. I got to do 162, and it was just bang on. So for me, the question is like, yes, of course it's there. I think it kind of sucks in a
Me
way, to
too.
be honest.
Yeah.
Like was it
It takes
Anton?
more of the art out of the sport, doesn't it?
Exactly. I think it was Anton that was on the Single Track podcast, and he was talking about like, that's not why I got into the sport. I didn't get into the sport to like measure with a gram scale how many grams of carbohydrate and sodium I'm taking on, and like wear heart rate monitors. I'm scaling this rock. Like, I don't want to go there. Like, this is what the sport means to me. And I think everybody's in that position now of, man, I don't want to do that to be a world champion or whatever. Like, this is my romantic idea of the sport. And you just kind of have to decide, will I be 1% or 0.5% slower for that, but happy?
It's a tale as old as the time, I guess, and personal decision about how bad do you want to win versus how bad do you want to.
Right. Like, why are you here in the first place? Is it to win at all costs, or is it to experience the journey, or et cetera?
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll come to your why here a little bit later. You can meditate on that a little bit, but I think people would be interested to hear, maybe using Black Canyon as the example here, and that massive, like, to me, I was actually impressed and surprised at how well you ran there, especially being like your first competitive 50K. To be sandwiched between Jesherin and Chris Myers is a baller result. But like, as you have come into the sport, I would love to hear like specifically how you've adjusted your training to be a more specialized pure runner, especially if it was kind of your biggest quote unquote vulnerability as a triathlete. Like, what are you doing differently in training?
I don't swim hardly at all anymore. I go to the pool just to like join Paula, so she doesn't have to drive across town all by herself. And I do actually enjoy it when I don't have to get in and do a hard set and be hypoxic. I really enjoy it, and it feels like it loosens everything up. And then I've pretty much cut out hard bike workouts. Like, the bike sessions have become much more like a steady state, or like a zone, like high zone 2 or something. And I'm getting that kind of like muscular endurance and just aerobic endurance without having any of the pounding. So like, I'll do like a 4-hour ride on Sunday, and I'll do a couple of 90-minute rides that are just like holding a steady power throughout the day. I mean, throughout the week. And that also just like, I love biking so much that I don't think I can ever give that up no matter what. So to keep it incorporated, I still want to be doing that for the rest of my life. But then like I've started doing actual like longer, harder runs. I don't do any just like go run for 3 hours, but like I've been working up to, as a race approaches, to like doing a bunch of quality inside of a 2.5 hour run, like the last couple weekends.
Yeah.
And then doing like I started doing a couple of double thresholds, just like, I think pretty classic stuff that you guys are already doing, but supplementing some of the mileage. So I'm only doing like maximum 120K, 135K a week. But then I've also got like 10 hours of cycling in there.
Yeah. So you're not doing any of the soul running though. I mean, going back to Anton, that was when I was going into the sport. It was like just reading his blog. It was nonstop 3 to 5 hour, just, going out jogging in the mountains. But of course, he was, I think in those runs, at least unintentionally tempoing up some of those climbs, knowing, because I've joined him on a couple of them in my day. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to hear you say you haven't been just getting out for the kind of slow volume based work.
I won't lie. I'm not psyched about that. If I have like looking back on this summer of committing to 50Ks, I liked last summer better. I didn't have a coach, and I was still just like training with Paula. I was jumping in on our tempo runs and our interval workouts. And then on the weekends, I would just like go run 3.5 hours up in the volcanoes here, long and slow with friends. And then I had a great race at Smith Rock with like a couple of long-ish hard runs, like very minimal relative to what I did prior to Black Canyon and prior to what I did for Kodiak. And I think, that's another part of the like equation for like 100K versus 50K. And I've like heard Tabor and Eli talk about this as they, did some 100K this year. Like that's like, that balances you out, and that feels good. I think that's what a lot of us got into. I'll talk about us like I'm one of you guys, but into trail type stuff and like in mountain biking that I've done is just going out and exploring. And that's the only thing about the 50K training that's rough. You got to do so many intervals.
Did you and Eli ever overlap as triathletes?
Oh yeah. I mean, one of my most viral videos is, one of my final triathlons is I was domestiquing for a guy in a potential bid to be a domestique, which is a helper, in the, World Cup. Where's this down? This was WTS in, Montreal. Eli's in front of me and his chain snaps and he takes us both out. Going up a climb.
Come on, Eli.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He's
on,
like
chain manufacturer.
Oh, dude, I'm not blaming him, but also like, dude, I definitely don't want to hear about that chain being old because I'll definitely blame you. But yeah, we overlapped a fair bit. We raced several times. In his final year, he was racing really well, and I think he ran me in a couple of races, and then we got taken out in that race. But I still haven't raced him in the 50K.
His ascent in the sport, I think, has been rather remarkable. You know, to go from this struggling pro triathlete to all of a sudden the 50K world champion, more or less, from OCC last year, and of course the example of Heather Jackson we've already mentioned, and now you. I mean, there's whatever they say, you know, three's a pattern at this point.
I think Eli is so interesting because he clearly had something that was untapped in the demands of short course triathlon draft legal racing. Like, he was a fantastic swimmer. He was a good enough cyclist, and he was really becoming a good runner there in the last couple of years, but a very balanced guy. But there's also like the longest climb you're ever going to experience in a triathlon of that distance is like 45 seconds. Yeah. And that's just maximum sprint effort. So his ability to go uphill, it just was completely not, it's like a sleeping dragon. It was, nobody knew about it until he came over into trail. And also I just like personally having spent time, like we raced together in Barbados, partied after the race, and I've chatted with him a bit and hung out, and like his personality is trail. Like, I think triathlon, you have to have a couple of these, like, just screws wound so tight because of where it is as a sport. And it's just about being on the red line, not a lot of strategy for 4 to 8 hours. Like, he has just like a little bit more of that free spirited kumbaya-ness that I think was just like perfect for trail.
Buddy,
in my opinion.
It feels like I could say the exact same thing about you though.
Oh, maybe. I mean, we're kind of similar, but Eli particularly, I've been psyched to see, him kind of come over to trail, and feels like he fulfilled his destiny. Yeah,
absolutely. And it feels like he's still in the early phases of fulfilling even more destiny in the years.
Sky's the limit.
So before we come to some of the harsher learning experiences after your very strong debuts here in our sport, I don't know, I'd love to spend a minute just talking about cycling too, because, now it's coming up in my mind of how Heather has been able to balance both sports, and feels like you would be somebody who might be compelled to jump into something like an Unbound or a Leadville 100, things like that. Does that interest you here in this new phase of your professional athletic career?
Yeah, but I'm not as good as Heather. I'll just be completely honest. The level of men's pro cycling and men's pro trail running, and I guess I'm not saying that correctly. It's not about men versus women, but like my ability relative to the field is not at Heather's level. Like, Heather was on the podium at Kona Ironman World Championships, like a specific long distance race. I have not done that. I would have no illusion of thinking that I could be on the podium of Ironman World Championships. So like, yes, I think she made that jump. For me, I would be going and doing these gravel events to experience them, do them to the best of my abilities, but like very obviously saying like, hey, don't expect me. I'm not showing up to win, because the people who are winning these like are completely dedicated to this 100%. And I'm not at that level of being able to do both.
I think there'd be a lot of people who'd be interested in watching a film by Eric Lagerstrom about Rip and Unbound 250 or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, if you like draw the timeline out long enough, then maybe. And I'm actually more interested in stuff like there's an FKT for the Oregon Outback gravel ride, which goes just like the entire length of the state of Oregon. Something like that does have more. Like gravel racing has also professionalized to the level of like people are bringing domestiques with them. They're bringing a team. Like it's like so hyper focused and everything, but the longer distance stuff still feels like a little bit, it's out there. It's you and yourself, and you're finding out something and going the distance. So that kind of thing does excite me.
Yeah. The mix of performance and art is where you thrive. So
Yeah, I feel like through my career, I've realized that what I have to bring to the world is this blend of like sharing the journey and the excitement. And it's not necessarily like going all in and completely forgetting about the sharing process for the sake of getting 2 spots higher on the podium.
yeah, well said. Okay. So again, you were hot out of the gates here as a 50K athlete. And then, it seems like you've had a couple bits of learning. We can kind of skip over the East Trail Fest, but you got second place there, but you characterized it as a blow up in your guys' YouTube video.
Yeah.
Shout out Daybreak Racing. There are great partners on the events that we do. So you can add whatever color you want there too. But I would love for you to focus on Kodiak, because this is when we were like, okay, we're finally doing a podcast here. Kodiak was a good story, though, sort of harsh learning experience. So take us from the high of finishing second place at Black Canyon to what you've learned since.
Yeah, I put East on the calendar after finally getting over my elbow break and being able to ride my bike and getting back to everything, as kind of like a practice or a thing that would expose the weakness that I perceived my biggest weakness to be for Kodiak, which is just climbing and racing at a little bit of elevation. So East is on the side of Mount Hood. Like the first hour of the race is all sustained uphill. It's not that steep, but it is uphill. And then you actually finish by running up their ski resort and back down, which is like kind of similar to Kodiak, a little bit flipped. But in Kodiak, you start with like 3K flat and then run up their ski hill. And then you're just like on the ridge running at 7,800 feet or whatever ungodly altitude that was. So that's what East was for, was just try to get a little confidence there, see if I can learn anything. And I learned that I went out too fast and should not like try to bluff with a mountain runner in the equation. But I don't know. Kodiak is hard for me to draw a lot of conclusions from because I feel like there are a lot of factors. The
you
elevation
went there specifically though to qualify for OCC, right?
Yeah. Like, I really want to go to OCC. I mean, or UTMB in general, like CCC, OCC, like I'm kind of, starting to think about the difference between those two, but like I am excited by that world stage.
I'm so psyched to hear you say that. I'm just so psyched.
I mean, yeah, after watching Heather do it and just kind of like starting to drink a little bit of the Kool-Aid, like the epicness of the scenery and just, all the best people showing up, like it's exciting. It's cool. Totally. As much as of an artist as I am or whatever, I still like love competing and that's an exciting proposition. So yeah, that was the point of going to Kodiak. And I knew that this was not like an ideal time in the calendar. It was not an ideal race for me. I definitely wouldn't pick something that was at that altitude. I would pick something that maybe the climbs were like a little more gradual instead of, these are like pretty much just like boom up and then down and then back up. Yeah. But whatever. It's like it's top 10 to qualify. And if I can do well there, then I kind of like proved myself again, like, hey, I can do something that I don't consider to be like my ultimate strength. But yeah, there are a lot of factors going into it because I don't live at altitude. I live at, Ben's at 3,000 feet. I did as much as I could leading into the race. Like I went and slept at our ski hill, which is at 6,000 feet for like the 2 weeks leading in to try to, I'm going to say like take the edge off of the altitude.
There's a whole community who lives in the parking lot at Mount Bachelor, isn't there?
Well, I was a community of like 2 because it was late season and kind of snowy, starting to get snowy up there.
Does stuff like that too.
Yeah, yeah.
In Bend, he sleeps in the bus up there at Mount.
I know, yeah, and he's a legend for that. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, there's just like a lot of good, jumping off points up there for like running up a lot of different mountains. So I did that. But I was like kind of coming off of following my wife around, racing a bit, doing the best that I could to keep up the training, had a lot of stuff going on with the business, had some personal things going on in life. And so I got to the race kind of feeling like this. Maybe you felt this like towards the end of the last couple times you raced of, oh my gosh, like I just popped out of like the business entrepreneur bubble into this like world-class event. And I've oh my God. Right. Okay. Like I stopped responding to like emails and everything. But it's just like so completely foreign and different to how you've prepared for races, like your entire life of like thinking about it every day nonstop until it's like finally comes. And so that was just like, I can't discount like that mental like kind of crazy whiplash that happened on race week as far as the result goes. But
all right, so the video's not out yet, but as I understand, you started cramping, things were starting to unravel for you somewhere in the middle of the race, and then you went off course. So it was sort of like the 1-2 punch of, concentrated learning that we all deal with eventually in our sport.
The only thing you're missing is I went off course before the cramping and all that happened as well. I went off course probably 4 or 5 times.
Welcome the first to trail running, buddy.
Yeah. The first one was just the most devastating, unfortunately. I was running top 10 at that point. I was right behind, is it Cole Williams? No, not Cade Williams. He just came back. He hasn't raced in a little. Sorry?
Cade Michael?
No, not Cade Michael, but he's awesome. This is a Brooks guy who I think he hadn't raced in like a year or something. And he's been around for a long time. And his name's just escaping me right now. But he was running in 8th, I was running in 9th, and then the lead woman was running right behind me. And we all just together just completely missed the first turn off of like the ski road as to like go onto single track. And in my defense, I think the course marking could have been better. It kind of felt like whoever marked the course hadn't like considered how you would be feeling if you were racing at 7,500 feet up a mountain and where your eyes would be to like disallow you from going the wrong way, in my defense. But I did go the wrong way. There were course markings. I just didn't see them. And I just followed the group that I was with. And it took us like 5 minutes of continuing to run up the freaking ski hill before realizing it. And I had the thing on my watch and everything, and it just didn't beep. Everything went wrong. And then I was like, found myself down in a gully trying to reconnect with the trail, up and back, came back into the group. I know like I didn't know what place it was, but I think it was about 40th place. Caught like 10 people on the way up the thing, on the way to like the first aid station. Nobody there had any idea what place I was in because so many people had come through. Saw Chris, hilariously, Chris Myers at like probably 15K in, and I was like, dude, what place am I in? And he's like, it's not top 10. Don't worry about it, man. To which I almost pulled over and just like wanted to kick him right there. But I'm like, I went off course. I don't know where I am, So I just kind of set about running hard and kind of figured it was all over at that point, but slowly started clawing people back on that high section.
Well, I mean, I think it's admirable that you eventually did make it to the finish line. I think you were top 20 somewhere outside of what you thought was automatic qualification for OCC. But, a lesser man would have quit in that situation, but you're a grizzled veteran having competed for your entire life. And I think, you got to the finish line. And I mean, that's honestly, it does happen to everybody, and that's how you learn, right?
Yeah. I haven't done enough of these. It doesn't feel as like, unnovel or as routine as triathlons do, to where like I'm here, I flew here in an airplane and drove, and I got an Airbnb and all these things, like, and I'm seriously going to stop a 4-hour race 25 minutes in because I went off course. That's what I kept telling myself. Like, no matter how bad it is right now, like we're at altitude. I bet a ton of people are going to blow up massively. Anything could happen. I've got 3 hours to work with here to get from like 30th, 40th, whatever the heck place. I just need to get to the top 10. Yeah. So every person that I caught, I kept asking, I'm like, hey, any idea what position we're in? I'm just like curious. And it wasn't until I think like 30K in, I don't know who it was, but it must've been somebody who was a pro I caught. And like, oh, I think we're like in 12th and 13th. And unfortunately, that's right about the same time that I started cramping, but that gave me a renewed lease on life and a reason to be out there and continue going hard. And I rode that like energy burst right into the ground and like fully beyond cracked on the final climb, to the point of where when we made it to the top of the final climb, I was still in 10th. And everybody around me was cracked too and barely moving, but I straight up couldn't even stand up. Like the proprioceptors in my calves were cramping so violently that I would like go to put my foot on the ground and I would just step on the outside of my foot, and I had no control whatsoever. And like fully just had to stop for like 3 or 4 minutes. And then I walked 10K.
Yeah. But you got
brutally.
it done. You got
I
it done,
did.
man. That's so important. It's so important.
Yeah,
Right.
it was. I'm glad I did.
All
I'm glad I
right.
did.
So I would love to hear what you learned, but also you texted me a screen cap that you got a notification of your automatic entry into OCC next year, which you probably wouldn't have gotten with a DNF. So tell
No,
us about what you learned and how this automatic qualification into OCC influences the goals for 26.
yeah. Well, I learned that I guess you can qualify I don't know. I qualified as a 35 to 39-year-old male. So
Okay.
in my age group, but the email came from Elite Services. So I was extremely confused about what was going on. But yeah, it was like, congrats on your stellar performance at Kodiak 50K by UTMB. I think you got the wrong guy. This is somebody else. But I emailed people and found out, and that's the case. So apparently, like, I can go race, and I just, depending on where my UTMB ranking is at the time of the race, I may or may not be allowed into the front corral or something, is what I've gotten out of that. So,
okay. Well,
that's,
that's pretty meaningless. I mean, at OCC, yeah, you might be jockeying for position in the first couple.
That's my hope.
But
yeah.
I mean, if you're on the start line, you're on the start line. So
yeah.
Right,
I think the biggest thing, just to like answer your question though, like the biggest takeaway for me was like respecting like what's going on in life and how much stress that does actually take, and then how much these races do take out of you. So like I raced the Y East race, and then I did a swim run race, which was ultimately like 1,800 meters of elevation and 32K of running. And then I did this, and I think I was just a little bit cooked, plus life things. And for next year, I'm going to be much more intentional about like laying out, here are the places that I really want to be good, and whatever I have to do, like to make sure that business things aren't happening on the month before that, et cetera, whatever it is, to like be ready to show up when you want to show up.
Have you started mapping that out? I was curious because like now you have the runway to build a season towards OCC. You've got the qualification. So I was going to obviously peer pressure you to come around the Big Alta or Gorge Waterfalls, Portland boy, Oregon boy. You could come get home field advantage, but I love it. I mean, to me, it feels like, okay, you've got the tools, you've got the promise, and it's sort of like, now's the time. You've got OCC that you can put on the calendar for 10 months and work towards.
Yeah.
Like what would be the building blocks that you would use on that path?
I feel like I was hoping to ask you that, because I don't really know.
The Big Alta and Gorge Waterfalls, obviously.
Well, those would be two, like at the top of my list. I've been wanting to do Gorge for like 3 years now, and it just keeps falling on inopportune weekends. But I've been kind of trying to pay a little bit of attention to the guys who like won UTMB and who have done well at OCC. What early season races did they do? How far was it spaced out, et cetera? And if I do UTMB, OCC, whatever, does it make sense to do Black Canyon, because it's like such a completely different type of running and stimulus, even though it's a big deal? Or do you, pick out Big Alta or Gorge or something, and like, what should the spacing be?
Yeah.
I don't even know how many times people race. Like my coach asked me that as I said, I got to go to Pacific Trails to get qualified for OCC still. And he's like, how many times do ultra people race a year? You know, marathoners only race twice a year, really. Like, oh shit. That's a good point.
Well, it's different, right? Because like if you look at Tom Evans, who won UTMB, he raced a total of 3 times this year across a variety of distances, but really UTMB was the only one that mattered to him. Yeah. Then you look at somebody like Eli, who comes more from your background. He races like, twice every weekend, it feels like, leading up to his races. So this is one of these places where there's really no consensus as to what the quote unquote best thing to do is.
Yeah. I feel like you got to be in that early phase too, where people are just like figuring it out a bit. And I feel like this is the similar thing in triathlon. As our seasons have gotten super long, people are just finding out like, oh yeah, you raced 2 years in a row from like March to December, and it seemed like it was going great. And then in the year 3, just like total hormonal collapse, or like you couldn't put together a good race for 3 years after that. Yeah. So like, I don't know, like play it a little bit more cautious on the racing less versus more, even though it's hard.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's so good to have you in the sport, man. I just love that you're enjoying it. And I look forward to seeing many more top performances from you. Before I let you go, we obviously got to talk about Paula and her preparation for 70.3 Worlds here. I think you said you're leaving on Friday. Mm-hmm. The race is next weekend. give some shine to your wife, Paula, one of the best in the world. She's got to be one of the favorites going in, right?
Yeah, for sure. She's been second at this race. She's been ranked in the top 5, and is always in the conversation for the podium for 70.3 worlds. And this course is really, really good for her. The bike course has like 7,000 feet of elevation gain, which doesn't sound like an insane amount in the trail space, but usually a half Ironman will have like 1,000 or 1,500 feet of elevation gain over 56 miles. And she's really, really strong on the bike. So I think this one will be really exciting to watch as a broadcast, just to see like sparks fly on a kind of unusual course. And she's been doing a lot of specific prep with that in mind, both like working on her uphill abilities, just climbing power, and then also on descending and confidence through corners. Because on a course like that, preservation of momentum is huge.
Yeah. Maybe one final triathlon related thing before our traditional closing question. One of the things that's been a hot topic in the sport for the last 5 years is, Ironman's involvement in trail and how the event landscape is changing with that reality. And in triathlon now, as I view it, T100 seems to be like a well-established series. Obviously, Challenge has been around. I don't know if they're still relevant. You got the ITU stuff, but is there anything that trail running could learn from, things from triathlon's past about just where the event landscape is going, the good, the bad, the ugly?
Yeah. It kind of comes back to what I said about like, you have a time right now, an opportunity to set a precedent. And what Paul and I, always kind of comment about as we're watching trail running and we're listening to trail podcasts and everything. And people are like, oh, the T100 athletes, they've got it so good. And oh, if only we could get there and this. And like, be careful what you wish for, because a lot of the reason that triathletes are coming over, in my opinion, and doing trail stuff is because you don't have that. You don't have quite as much professionalization and a monopoly on events. And, like an Ironman event is done very well, but it's kind of like, it's like Starbucks. No matter what, you're going to come in and their standard is going to be X. Is there soul? No. But like, it's not going to let you down. And my hope, like for both triathlon and trail, is that like those monumental events like Black Canyon or Cocodona and Big Alta and like unaffiliated or like you're not part of a gigantic monolithic race organization, that those can continue to be prioritized and and have their space. Cause I think that's what shapes the soul of the sport. In triathlon, we had like Wildflower, and you got Escape from Alcatraz, and like Kona's always been there and is part of the Ironman machine, but it does have its own special, unique reason to exist. And that reason is not just money. It's because there's like a soul and a history.
Are there important independent races in triathlon beyond Escape from Alcatraz at this point? Like the equivalent of a Black Canyon 100K in triathlon?
Well, unfortunately, so I guess here's a lesson. Short course is non-draft racing used to be a big thing. And this was what initially pulled me away from draft legal ITU Olympic pipeline. So you're doing an Olympic distance, sub 2 hour race, but it's on a TT bike. This used to be kind of like the lifeblood of American triathlon. And Ironman came in like in 2016 or so, bought up 90% of like Chicago Triathlon, New York City Triathlon, Nations Triathlon, et cetera, and combined them all into the Lifetime series. Sound familiar? In gravel. And unfortunately, it didn't work out super well. It wasn't that profitable, and they kind of just shut it down after a couple of years. So I guess my recommendation would be Jamil, et cetera, you like, maybe if you got it in your heart to not sell to like the UTMB machine and just like let it become part of the whole thing, like if we can have some people take that hit financially, potentially, it can keep those events alive.
All right. A good place to end. I know you got to run, but dude, it's great to have you in the sport. Like I said, I end all these conversations in the same place, which is another traditional closing question. Who is one person that you admire? Can be inside or outside of sport, living or dead. Why do you admire that person?
Probably my biggest inspiration is a guy named Ralph Dunning. He designed our original TTL logo. His company is called Foreign Rider. His previous company before that was called the Dunning Company. And his commitment to running his company, like I just said, in the way that he wants to, whether or not that's necessarily the most profitable or logical or easy pathway, like that's super inspirational to me. Like, this is how we do it, full stop. If that doesn't pay the bills and we go bankrupt, that's okay. We're not going to cheat. We're not going to cut any corners.
I love that, dude. And as somebody who's also, struggling with that stuff all the time, it's good to have role models like that, because it is so easy to get caught up in the spreadsheets and the math and the bottom line. That really the magic is in the values and the energy and the heart that you put into things, isn't it?
Yeah. Like you said, I think if you do the thing that you feel like you were put on this earth to do, like the money it'll work out.
Yeah, I'll include a link to Ralph's new brand, Foreign Rider, who I discovered through you, Mr. Lagerstrom, in the show notes, so people can go check it out.
Awesome.
Eric, good to chat, buddy. Good luck to Paula at 70.3 Worlds. We'll be cheering for her.
Dude, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for your time. This was great. Had a blast.